We developed it because it was actually, well, it had been, as I mentioned before, 93 acres.
That's cool.
Surrounded by these 3 main street and then 1 property line between the Russell estate and the rest of this whole section of Princeton, so to speak. And that, by the time we were contemplating what to do with the rest of with the estate that remained, my mother and I particularly were interested to see it going, but the question was how to do it. It would preserve as much as possible of what we'd always enjoyed, and that was, it was down to about 43 acres, because the perimeter, except for a couple of spaces, had been sold off, sort of according to the regulations, 1 property deep, all the way around the perimeter, leaving us with about 47 acres, I guess it was. And that maintained 1 unit width over on Stockton Street, which was the main entrance to the house that circled in front of the main house, counterclockwise, ending up in this rectangle here, this square, which was all gravel and was just the place where all the horses and carts and different things would come and park underneath that roof over there, which was open shed, which is now enclosed and a hedge built up over it. But that really, after horses had given out and cars came in, then this became an apartment where a caretaker lived with his family, and there was another apartment, sort of a 1-bedroom apartment above the western end of the building, which was one that ultimately my grandmother used as a place to go in the winter instead of trying to heat the whole main house.
Sure.
And so, as a boy, I visited there with my sisters, and in the summers, early spring, we would go over to the main house, and we each had our own bedroom and had a wonderful open house, so to speak, when spring came. And it was always great fun because the dining room was open to whatever family members were anywhere nearby. And they all came for some of the big meals of the day, like Easter and later in the summer. And we all sat around the big table in what was the dining room, which then became an apartment. And that was the living room of the new apartment once it was all divided up into 60-some units. The main house was divided into basically 6 units, and then 2 units, 7 and 8, were the part of the carriage house here, and this room, which you're sitting in, which is sort of about half of the carriage house, going all the way to the far end where there was a narrow stair going upstairs. But basically this was one apartment and that was two apartments. Once the automobile took over and horses were inhabitant. So I don't remember too much about when automobiles took over, but I guess it was about 1908 or early 1900s, and that's when the horses disappeared, and there was always a driveway coming in, which was just sort of one 50-foot right-of-way coming in from Elm Road to get into the service and kitchen end of the main house, and then into here, as I mentioned, and then out to the front door and around down to Stockton Street. And when it came time to develop this, which my mother and I particularly felt it was absolutely necessary to do something about it because of the enormous taxes, as well as the fact it was so close into Princeton, that I said, well, what I'd like to do is develop it into a condominium in which we can at least plan out how to arrange the new buildings in such a way that everyone got as much privacy as possible and take advantage of the 47 acres. There had been a project across Stockton Street, part of the Marquand Park, or the Marquand Estate, I guess it was, or the Pine.
Marquand House.
Or Marquand House became a development of a series of apartments in the main house and had land to go with it. So we were following, in a sense, in what had happened there, thinking it might make it easier to get approval for something that was larger in scale here and based on more independent living units clustered in such a way that it gave both privacy but open space to the land. And so that's what happened. It was a big struggle with the planning board and the zoning board and everybody, and thank goodness for Tom Jameson and several others who helped with the process of getting it through the whole business. It was complicated because what's his name? The developer. Arthur Collins, who had been in architectural school before going into real estate development because his father was a big real estate developer in New York City, I guess. And he finally agreed to take on Constitution Hill as which became his first project in Princeton.